The foyer in my house has a coffered circle that I think was meant for something more than the LED light that's currently in it. So the project is to hang a ceiling medallion, a ceiling ring around that, and to hang a chandelier. The medallion ships in two halves that are meant to be glued together. There's a pretty big gap between the two halves, and to help close it, I'm going to use a biscuit joiner. With the biscuit joiner, I'm making slots into both halves of the medallion. Into those slots, we'll glue wooden biscuits that will both help with alignment when we glue up and also create a stronger joint. The manufacturer's directions for this medallion strongly recommended using Loctite power grab, so that's what I'm doing. I'm using it on the biscuits themselves and then all along both edges that are going to be joined. I'm then using ratchet straps placed around the medallion to squeeze it together. It's really important during the glue up to make sure that the seams are as flat with each other as possible. There will always be gaps, which you can fill with a filler, but if it's uneven, it's very hard to correct. The ratchet straps put so much pressure around the ring that I needed to put a weight in the middle to keep it from puckering up. I let that sit for 2 days before taking the weight and ratchet straps off, and for the most part it closed the gaps pretty well. The gaps that are left are filled with wood filler and then sanded down, and that is a very iterative process. I spent a long time trying to get the joints just perfect. You think they look perfect, and then as soon as you go to add primer, they look terrible, and you have to go back and add more filler and resand, and I do not want to tell you how many times I did that. This is the light fixture I'm going to be hanging from the center of the medallion. It's a ring LED light. It's meant to be surface mounted, that is sticking down from the ceiling about 1.5 inches. I didn't think I'd like the way that looked, so I'm cutting a circle out of the middle of the medallion that will let me seat the light fixture housing in there flush. The downside to doing that is that the LED driver is in the housing and it generates heat, and that heat is going to have less places to go when it's flush mounted. So here's the ring. It comes in 4 quarter circle pieces. I'm going to use the same process as I did for the medallion in terms of using the biscuit joiner to make slots that will, again, hopefully make stronger joints. Here's the glue up, again using the manufacturer's recommended Loctite power grab. That's cat hair on the ring, by the way. The cats do make a couple of cameos in this video. The seams of these ring segments did not go together very flush. So you'll see that after I ratchet strap the whole thing tight, I go back and add some cardboard shims to even them out. Here we are 2 days later, undoing the ratchet straps, but ending up with a pretty different situation than the medallion. When I went to pick it up, 3 of the 4 joints snapped as if they were barely glued at all. I scraped off the Loctite power grab and then switched products. Loctite has a PL 8X product that is very highly rated. After regluing the ring, it held up pretty well. It still had a little play in it though, so I wanted to go back and strengthen each joint by creating a slot and then gluing in a piece of wood to help stabilize it. After that, we are on to filling and sanding, filling and sanding, filling and sanding. The ring diameter is different than the coffered ceiling diameter, so I need to make some changes to one side of the ring to make it look right. I bought some L-shaped PVC molding that I'm running through the table saw and then gluing around the interior of the ring. I'd been using a regular caulk gun to put this adhesive in, but it was absolutely breaking my hand, and I did a little research. It turns out that there are caulk guns specifically designed for adhesives that have a higher thrust value. I'm embarrassed I didn't know that, but I switched to it and it works great. I will link it in the description. The other piece I need to add to the circle is a thin flat strip. I'm cutting it to width through the table saw and then running it through the planer to make it easier to bend. At this point, the ring and the medallion are ready to paint. First step is I go and prime all of the wood-filled areas, and then break out the paint sprayer for a few coats of paint. The color and sheen match the rest of the trim in the house. Last step before they go up is to prep the ceiling. It's currently textured, but I would like it to be flat. So I'm applying a skim coat of mud, sanding that down, priming it, and painting it to match the housing of the light fixture. While you're watching me do that, let's talk about what comes next, which is installing the molding. And we're going to be doing that with a pulley. That seems unnecessarily difficult, you might say. Well, the ceilings are 12 feet tall and they're hard to reach with a ladder. I could rent some scaffolding, but that doesn't solve the problem that this thing is going to be glued to the ceiling and needs to be held there while the glue dries. I could use nails or screws, but once you've spray coated something, it's very hard to patch and then apply more paint and get the sheen to look right. So what are we looking at here? We have the medallion sitting on two 8-foot cedar pickets with a rope fastened to them that runs up and through a pulley. So we didn't dent the medallion. I built little wooden stands that are cushioned and have the same profile as the molding. And because the thing is very unstable, I have two helpers that are pulling on each of those 4 strings to help keep it level as it goes up. When it made it to the ceiling, I wasn't getting even pressure all the way around the medallion, so I went up and I added some bubble wrap to try to even it out. Here we are the next day, loosen the rope, lower the pickets, and up the medallion stays. Here's a closer look at the pulley. It's attached to an eye-ring that is screwed into the joist. The rope comes down and fastens to the pickets using blocks that are screwed into the pickets. Those blocks are both securing the joint between the pickets and providing clamping pressure to the rope. The other side of the rope is tied off to about 100 pounds of weights. The picket structure weighs about 5 pounds, which is why I'm using pickets, because they're very lightweight. The medallion is another 15. The rope and the pulley are both rated in excess of 200 pounds, but keep in mind that the pulley is experiencing twice the weight because it's getting pulled on both sides. The ring is a little heavier than the medallion. It's about 40 pounds, including the pickets. The bubble wrap was not a great solution for applying pressure, so this time I have 3 extendable painter poles. I've taped soft shirts to the ends of each. By wedging those in, we can really squish the ring and the glue up against the ceiling, and that pressure plus the pressure of the pickets is going to hold it until it dries. Next day, the pickets come down and the ring stays up. Last piece is the light fixture. Because I'm going to be mounting it flush, I need to drill some holes for screws up through the face of the housing. And then on the ceiling side, I need to mount just a piece of wood that those screws can grab onto. That plug is there because at one point the project was going to involve running a string of LED lights around the top of the ring. But I liked it without the lights, and so that part got scrapped. Here is the first and completely unsafe way I was going to mount the light. I tied a rope through the housing and up to the top of the painter's pole. Then I extended the painter's pole all the way up to the ceiling. The idea was that that would hold it while I did the wiring and then somehow help me to get the thing screwed in. What happened instead is that the knot I researched specifically not to pull through, pulled through. The whole light fixture dropped and was held for just a second there by the electrical wires.
I need help.
Sums up this whole idea, doesn't it? The second idea was to build this platform. This is out of those same cedar pickets. And then I am force threading it onto the top of the painter's pole. The light fixture goes on top of the platform, and the painter's pole is braced vertically using an 8-foot ladder. So what we can do now is just extend the painter's pole and get it close enough to wire. After we have it wired, we can slide the pole up even further to help get the light housing flush into the ceiling medallion. With one screw in, we lowered it so I could get better access to the other screws. And then finally lowered all the way. And that wraps it up. I did caulk the ring against the ceiling, but not the medallion against the dark paint. Very happy with how it turned out. I will say this is not the cheapest project. The molding in particular was very expensive. I'll link those pieces and the light fixture in the description.